Without further ado, it's Babber-in-Chief, the Gertlush, James Price, former Conservative government advisor. Good morning to you, James.
All right, my lover. How are you, Alex?
I'm all right. Where are you? You look like you're sitting in front of a shower curtain.
That's just what Mr. Jeremy Kyle said the other day, but I'm sure that you will be much kinder than he was about Mummy Price's lovely curtains that I've got behind me.
Oh, you're in God's own county. Oh, best of love to your rents over there.
Absolutely right.
Oh, good choice, good choice. Well, that means we're going to get extra common sense if you're plugged into the motherboard this morning. Talking about common sense, not much apparent at the BBC. I mean, it just keeps on coming, doesn't it? We had, first of all, the weird Gaza documentary narrated by a child of Hamas. Then we had this revelation that BBC Arabic was basically just BBC Hamas. I think we all knew that anyway. And then, of course, it was this. The latest thing is this Maxine Croxall thing. Before that, Donald Trump and the splicing together footage to make it look like he's inciting insurrection. I mean, for crying out loud. They say they're the world's most trusted news brand. They can't even be trusted to tell you that the sky is blue.
No, the whole thing is absolutely extraordinary, Alex, and I know you've got a great story about your own association with the BBC and you seeing inside the dark underbelly of the beast of it all. But it is terrifying to realise just how much more, I don't want to say corrupt, but crooked some of the reporting ends up being. You know, just take the first example from this bombshell report that came out, the Donald Trump splicing video. They took sections of a speech that were 50 minutes apart and stuck them together to make it look like Donald Trump has said something that he hadn't said. Why was this? This was years after this happened, in the sort of month before the election in America last year. Presumably someone thought, oh, well, maybe there are a couple of Americans watching this, living in Britain, who are on the fence, and we might be able to convince them not to vote for Donald Trump. I can think that's probably one of the only reasons why they would do it, other than that kind of foaming at the mouth hatred for bad orange man that some people still seem to have, despite him stopping all the wars and all the rest of it that he stopped. And then you go, it keeps on going, and fair play to the Daily Telegraph for getting their hands on this report and dripping out a new mad story every day. Now, full disclosure, I know the man who wrote the report. I actually used to work for him many years ago, and he's a very decent, honourable man. I think he's a former newspaper political editor himself, who then moved into corporate world, but was asked to go and help out the BBC and would highlight these sorts of things, as clear from this report, and was ignored again and again and again. And I think there really are some questions to be answered here, and if they're not, then I think that the Prime Minister needs to show some stones and fire people at the BBC by whatever means necessary.
I mean, this is my big issue here. I'm amazed that the revelations about the editing of the footage in Panorama haven't really been addressed by the BBC at all. They've basically said, oh, we don't comment on leaks, as if they're like a political party in government. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're the public service broadcaster. You better comment on this. But it's just staggering. If they were in the private sector, there would be mass firings by now. And I don't think we focus enough on what happens to these BBC executives who broadcast Bob Villan, who oversee the editing of that footage in Panorama. Because having worked briefly in investigations at the BBC, I can tell you right now that every single person in that investigations team would have known the process that went into deliberately, and it is definitely deliberately, editing that footage, and definitely editing it to give a very sort of pejorative, negative overview. You can tell because they put that sort of like, you know, grey filter and a drone sound underneath, as if they're sort of, I don't know, producing Line of Duty or something. It's like, for crying out loud. But what goes on with these people? I mean, why aren't we being told that the editor of that programme has been sacked? Although, I don't know, I have a feeling, and this won't surprise you, I think she's gone to work for Hamas's favourite mouthpiece, Al Jazeera, which would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? But poor old Martine Croxall, let's have a look at this, because there is a little bit of delight in watching the sort of movements on her face as she changes the auto cue.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
I love that. It's just a slight widening of the eye, a little arched eyebrow. To be fair, I do love a bit of Martine, but she's got what one might call sort of a resting bad girl face. Anyway, when she reads the auto cue, she's not sort of one of those like really smiley, she sort of looks very serious, a bit like she's annoyed at the news, annoyed at having to like tell everyone how rubbish the world is. But why? I mean, the BBC just picked totally the wrong side of this again.
It is absolutely extraordinary, this. I remember this sort of brouhaha coming out at the time. And, all power to this woman for insisting on speaking in terms that are based in reality. There was a while where we all had to go around and say pregnant people, chest feeding, and all this sort of mad stuff with people wearing woman face and us pretending that this was okay. And if people want to go and do that in the privacy of their own homes, that's fine. You can't make children do these things, which is what many of them wanted to do. And you certainly can't have, as you say, the national broadcaster or state broadcaster, as I think we should probably get used to calling it, acting in this way. And, a lot of people jump to comparisons with George Orwell's 1984 when it comes to Starmer pushing out ID cards and all these things. And sometimes it's a little bit overblown. But I just want to quickly read one sentence from 1984 that manages to predict this exact incident perfectly. In any case, to wear an improper expression on your face, to look incredulous when a victory was announced, for example, was itself a punishable offence. There was even a word for it in Newspeak. Face crime, it was called. And Maxine has clearly been found guilty by the BBC of face crime.
I love that, face crime. Do you know, I've actually just started to listen to 1984 as an audio book because I constantly read about 85 things at once, and I thought it's about time I delved back inside the covers of 1984. I know, but I mean, is it true, actually? Someone told me, and I don't know if it's just one of those urban myths, that it's called 1984 because the Fabian Society were established in 1884, and it's supposed to be a projection of what sort of rabid global socialism would do to the world within a century. And if that is the case, it is very accurate. I kind of wish we could bring Orwell back down, sit him here and go, right then, son, what do you make of this then? Because, it really is quite astonishing. So are you suggesting to me that the Telegraph have even more material that they're going to be releasing?
I think that's right. I think that this report goes to 19, 20-odd pages, and I can imagine, knowing the guy, and I've not spoken to him about this, but knowing Mike Prescott, who is the man who authored this report, and I don't know how it got leaked. I'm sure that he didn't do it because he's a man of unimprovable rectitude. He's a very good man indeed, but will have packed this full of very important and well-researched and well-founded things. And it's my understanding that this has gone all the way up to the very top of the BBC, and it's been ignored. The board has said to the Director General, yeah, you're fine, carry on, pretend it doesn't happen. What was the line you said, Alex? They say we don't comment on leaks as if they're a political party or something. No, this is people that you can go to prison, you can get punished by the state if you don't pay the licence fee and you're caught watching TV, even if you're not watching the BBC. It's a totally insane system that we have right now, and it's produced all kinds of horrendous stuff. I would say there are some great people at the BBC. I won't necessarily go and name all of them because they probably wouldn't thank me for it. But there are plenty of people, and that they're quite good if both sides start attacking them, because that means they're probably doing what you do, Alex, and what TalkTV does, is to represent some of these things fairly. But there are many, many, many people, and it's not just a sort of straight news bit, but it is the splicing, as you say. It's the people writing the auto cue to say pregnant people rather than pregnant women. It's the choice of what issues get discussed on the Archers or those sorts of things. Or on EastEnders, we must address this burning social issue. You never see people in the old Vic and EastEnders talking about the debt crisis or the pensions time bomb or the amount of FGM that goes on that never gets punished in this country, right? It's always some other kind of trendy lefty issue. And for that reason, I just think the BBC has run out of road, and there's some radical reform with a small r is needed for it.
Now, I've got a question for you. What do you call a group of people from Gloucester? What is the sort of plural of that?
I think we're top champs. No, I think it's Gloucestrians, is it not?
Gloucestrians.
From the Latin glevum, which I think meant the kind of glowing nature of Cotswold stone, which is, I think, where the word comes from.
Yeah, well, glewum, as they would have said in Roman times. Anyway, well, I think a group of Gloucesterians are called an ooar, and we're going to have one right now, because you'll be delighted to know that David, who is from God's own county, is on the line. Good morning to you, other Baba.
Good morning, Alex.
Hey.
Good morning. Oh, can't think of his name now.
James.
James, of course it is. Sorry, I hear him all the time, and obviously we're off in Gloucestershire.
Oh, we are indeed. Oh, this is amazing. I love this. This is like being back down the Cafe Rene pulling pints.
Yeah, well, I'm down the Forest of Dean, so, you know, I'm just on the edge, so...
Wow.
But, very quickly...
Yeah.
They've obviously sploushed this footage with Trump. Well, what's to stop them doing it, for argument's sake, against somebody like Nigel Farage on the eve of the next election and changing an election result?
It's a very good question, but, as they say in the Forest of Dean. But, James, it is... I mean, look, one could argue, actually, because BBC World, most of the content of BBC World is broadcast internationally. I don't know whether that includes Panorama, but one would imagine it's accessible internationally, and it at least has played a part, because this, of course, was... post Donald Trump 1.0 and ahead of Donald Trump 2.0, and it may have played a part in sort of building that narrative that he's dangerous, that he's toxic. And so when the BBC play games like this, when they allow their sort of liberal, leftist, elitist attitudes to sort of, you know, poke out of the edges in their reportage, could they, James, be accused of election manipulation?
Yeah, well, I think that's the big threat. And of course, the BBC doesn't go through the same kind of complaints process as other broadcasters do, without going too into the weeds on this. Before you can, I think, go to Ofcom like everyone else has to abide by, the BBC has its own internal complaints process. And I found myself complaining about something on the BBC. More on this later. I'm sure we'll talk about it in future weeks and months. But when you go to complain on their web form, there's only a small amount of space you can do it. And they say, oh, in that case, you can just send us a letter then. The idea is to make it as difficult to complain about the BBC as is possible. And so that in itself, I think, is not exactly full transparency. And to make it worse, BBC Verify, maybe this is the story that's the latest revelation from this bombshell report, that BBC Verify had to delete something because they got it completely and utterly wrong. It wasn't just the host's CV that was made up, but some of their stories are being made up. And of course, the last thing, if you've got a section on the BBC called BBC Verify that's meant to be trying to find out the truth, well, what on earth is all the other programming meant to be doing? Right? They shoot themselves in the foot with that completely.
No, I totally agree. Before I let you go, what do you think the solution is? Because, look, I'm sort of out of sync with most of the listeners, I'm sure, which is I wouldn't actually scrap the BBC and the licence fee. I know, shock horror. Even though I detest it along with everyone else, I wouldn't do that, and here's for why. Because a lot of other countries in the world are jostling to have the sort of diplomatic leverage and international brand projection that having a state-run broadcaster provides. You know, you've got CTV, Russia Today, Al Jazeera, France 24, all the rest of them. They would all love to have the prominence of the BBC. But I do think two things. Number one, that licence fee needs to be absolutely sliced in half at the very least. And the BBC need to be told to cut down on the amount they produce. They started off with basically one TV channel, a handful of radio stations. They've now got 4 TV channels, 2 of which are frankly pointless. And they don't just have a gazillion radio stations, including BBC, whatever it is, Asia or whatever, BBC One Extra, BBC everything you can imagine. But they're all in the podcast space. And I'm like, no, get out. You have no right to be using my licence fee to be paying people like Makita Oliver to keep her career alive, when frankly she should buy a Yeti mic, put some interesting stuff on her bookshelf and do it off her own bat. And then my second approach would be that every future Director General should be chosen via an electoral process that means outlining a manifesto that licence fee payers get to vote on. Because I think the great British public, if they were to say, right, these are the things we want you to produce, these are the things you're doing wrong, and the BBC were actually accountable, no taxation without representation, I think we would suddenly find it becoming a bit more normal. Do you think that plan would work?
Yeah, do you know what? On that second point, I've never thought of that before. I think that's a great idea, and I think we should have an awful lot more of that, because we've moved to a scenario, and you and I have whinged about the blob in Whitehall and elsewhere, and regulators and quangos and all these ghastly people that have all this power with no one knows their name, no one knows their face, you can't vote them out. I think that would be great. We should have more of that. You have it in America, right? People get voted onto school boards and sanitation commissions, right, and all sorts. More democracy, great idea. I'm also actually with you, and again, shock horror, on the BBC. I wouldn't scrap it, and I wouldn't privatise it. I would give it a much more narrow and much stricter mandate. It would be, I think, still factual news reporting, because I do think that having somewhere where they are forced by law to try and be neutral at least maybe has some positive benefits in giving a kind of one coherent national story. I wouldn't want to see that go straight away, because you see in America, for example, and I'm sure other places, the left and the right talk completely apart from each other and don't even know what's going on. But I would also then use it, as you say, diplomatically much better. It would require a lot more oversight, because you know, some of the things that come out in the English translation on BBC Arabic, someone says death to the Israelis, and actually what they really say is death to the Jews or whatever. Both, I think both are terrible, but you get those sorts of problems. So we could, you know, pump BBC Farsi into Iran and say, isn't it so terrible what they're doing, rise up? Or we could pump it into China and say, hey, you should all see what actually happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989. And the rest of it then back at home, if it can survive commercially, as you say, it should go to ITV or to Sky or to Talk or to wherever else you want it to go. And the BBC should make stuff that wouldn't necessarily survive commercially, but is of a higher level of beauty or interest and things like that, you know, and go full elitist and pump out opera and things like that, so that people can go, oh, I never realised this stuff was accessible to me. There's some person explaining to me why Wagner's great or whatever it may be. That's actually quite.
They wouldn't have Wagner, mate. He's way too right-wing for the BBC. Are you kidding me? Oh, James, thank you ever so much. It's always wonderful catching up with you, my babber, and thank you as well to David, my butt. There you go. If you don't know those words, you just haven't spent enough time in the West Country, have you? And your loss, I'm afraid.